everybody. Welcome to the Art of Tracking radio show. Tracking is still alive and well. Join us as we interview master trackers from around the world. We'll hear their stories, their secrets. So tune in and enjoy all you hear. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Tonight we have Ty Cunningham on again. Our last show was cut short, and we really have a lot to talk about with Ty Cunningham. He's a master tracker, and I want him to tell you his story and some of the things he's done, and then we're going to get into some really, really cool stuff. Ty, are you there?
I am.
How's it going, man?
Yeah, doing well, thank you.
Good, good. Ty, can we hear your history real quick, sir?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, I began tracking as a young boy in Bush, Alaska. My father was infantry sergeant first class, and he began teaching me how to train analysis and use that information on being able to understand movement patterns of both human and animal. And so I, at that point, became a dedicated student to this art and science and spent my whole life reading every possible trail I could. Just like most people who live in rural areas, it becomes necessary in order to live. And so that's how it all started. Of course, then I went into the United States Army after high school. Going into the Army, I was airborne infantry, and then was lucky enough to make it on to a alert team before they were phased out. That's long-range reconnaissance patrols. And it was there that I began to see how essential this skill is in being able to read the movement patterns of enemy and being able to bring that information as telltale of what's going on out with movement and battle. I did that, of course, 21 years between the active time and then Guard and Reserve time. And then 1991, my team leader told me about a job that I should apply for. And I hadn't finished college yet, but he told me that it would be a good job, and so I applied to be a U.S. Marshal in Alaska and became a deputy marshal. So then as a U.S. Marshal, you're a criminal investigator, and so then, of course, the footprints changed to more of an evidentiary base, being able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt using that evidence that certain things happen, at crime scenes, and U.S. Marshals are responsible for fugitive apprehension as our main investigative arm, and so that led me to what eventually led to 2 tracking units that the Marshal Service had me stand up for the Marshal Service, seeing that we're the national fugitive hunters, and they wanted these tracking units in place. The 1st District of Alaska, I set up the tactical tracking unit, which, because of Alaska being so remote. And our special operations group for the Marshal Service really didn't understand Arctic and subarctic environments. And us deputy marshals in Alaska, of course, that's what we lived and breathed in. And so they figured a tactical tracking unit would be essential to providing all jurisdictions of law enforcement an asset that would help in such a remote place.
Wow.
And so that tactical tracking unit was stood up in 1998, and I commanded that unit for 4 years, and then I got promoted and moved to Cheyenne, Wyoming. And, of course, word spread, and the U.S. Marshal and Chief Deputy there came to me and said, we'd like a tracking unit for Wyoming because it's very remote here, too. And so I looked at their environment, and it's not as wooded, and so the country that would have to be covered with missions there, I figured that a mounted presence would be very functional.
Nice.
So got with the U.S. Forest Service law enforcement branch who ran horses and pack trains up into the National Forest and did joint operations with them. We were brought in to look at the footprint evidence coming off of private ranches where they actually came into the national forest and went up into the national parks and how they actually moved, so that the Forest Service, who had jurisdiction, and the Park Service could then put together prosecution cases using the footprint evidence on how that happened. And you would not believe the criminal activity, high-level poaching that goes on in our own national forests and Yellowstone National Park. It's unbelievable. Yeah, so that's kind of how the overlay of all this went. Of course, there's a lot of subparts, and it was then, after the Wyoming time, that I transferred to western Missouri and was able to be selected nationally as the only deputy marshal in the year 2010 to go to the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. And it was there that I wrote my thesis, because it was so atypical, on forensic sporology. No traditional university really had a platform for that, and we were, of course, big into the war across the pond, and stability operations was a big thing, so they were bringing civilian government officials in to learn the military model, and that's how I got selected as one of 10 civilians in government to go to the command college that year. And we're talking, this command college has 1,000 officers every year that go to it from all our branches of service, as well as foreign countries. So it was a pretty big deal. And then from my thesis, it received the Simon Center Interagency Writing Award. So I was one of the 16 distinguished graduates out of a student body of 1,000, military officers. So it was precedented work at that time. I don't know, who's out there writing now at a scientific level, but
that is outstanding, man.
That's what we're going to talk about tonight, right?
Yeah. I definitely want to get into forensic sporology. Before we do, I'm kind of like I'm partially the romantic tracker as well. So I know you grew up in Alaska, and you had a lot of that more nature-sided tracking. Can you tell me some of the history, stories, or more some of your fondest memories growing up and learning that, that native side of tracking?
Well, as a boy growing up in southeast Alaska, the Tlingit and Haida Indians were a main part of cross-cultural assimilation that I had to do as a boy. In schools, they were learning, this was in the 60s, so they're learning the American ways, and then we in turn had to learn the native ways, how to do their wood carvings and paintings and beat their drums and do their dances and what their potlatches are all about. And I started to see a big connection between what we believe as imprinting and how that affects us mentally in what our beliefs are. And those beliefs then drive us to how we live. And so having that indoctrination when I was just a real small elementary boy allowed me a good platform to start to see the behavior of animals as they would tell their stories, and I would see these animals come to life in their stories, and then how they represented those stories back to the landscape and what they meant in their culture started my mind working. And as I was out looking from my father's tutelage on terrain analysis, being able to look at your environment, how anything would have to move within an environment, what was really happening with these animals? What were they really doing? What do their behaviors mean? And can I observe those behaviors? And then what do those behaviors look like when they walk on the ground, so that when I don't see them physically, I can then look at the ground and see the behaviors that the animals are producing. And of course, animals, then you have to think differently, because with animals, they have 4 contact points as opposed to just 2, and we think human, and I had to learn how to begin to think like the quarry. So in this particular case, didn't matter what animal quarry I was after, you have to think like they think, and the only way you can do that is to live their life. You have to go out, whatever it is you're wanting to master in the animal, you have to live it their way. In other words, it's emic, it's internal, from their point of view, not external or etic from a human point of view, looking at the animal. And of course, that's what drove my research later, right? Dealing with primitive cultures, native legends, and ancient warfare, and how that interrelates with all of us, man and animal, interacting based on natural laws with any environment that we move in. And so that is my backdrop. Of course, I've trailed every living thing possible that I could get my eyes on from a young boy even to this day. And that's the passion it takes in any profession, in anything, in a belief structure, an imprinting, to know that if it moves, you can see it. And if you can see it and observe it, you can understand it, you can interpret it, you can classify it. And that meaning that you glean off it then allows you to be predictive. You can predict future behavior, what that will look like in what I call the spoor-chain signature. based on my thesis. So
okay,
and I don't
right there. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought in saying, but that spore-chain signature, maybe it might be a good starting point.
No, I was just going to say that if you believe that it can be seen, if you have that as your imprint, then you don't stop until you can find it. And that's the backdrop to every tracker that I know, because they don't give up. They're tenacious. They have certain personality traits that make them very good. They become predators themselves, and they hunt for the information. And it is in that hunting process that a tracker lives, to gain that information. When you or I or any tracker see in the spoor on the ground, we actually look at the behavior and say, this is what just happened. They went here, they did this. This is what they're after. And where someone else would look at it and say, oh, look, this ground has been stepped on. And then that's as far as they dig. They stop right there because they don't know what it is, but they just know that it happened. And so that's where all tracking lies, is the ability to look down and believe. And if you look down and believe and you never stop, you'll be a good tracker.
What an outstanding introduction, man. Really quick, I want to really thank you for coming on the show. This has been great already. That is heartfelt and very down to the point. You were talking about how you understand and interpret, and this mentality that you have about it is interesting to me, because beginning, intermediate trackers are, that's part of what they're trying to figure out, is that mentality. And you mentioned that kind of belief, and I wouldn't want to say predator-like thing too strongly, but that was a great analogy. So that's great. That's great. I really appreciate it, Ty.
No worries. No worries. So do we want to jump into this thesis?
Yes. You said something about spore. What'd you say? Spore signature.
Spoor-chain signature. Yeah.
Spore-chain signature.
Let's deal with some vocabulary.
Great. Let's start there. That's a great place to start.
When I was in the command college, when you're at the master's level or higher, it's all research based, and so I had to have a language. I had to have a language that the people who are going to read this at the command college, of course, my committee chair and committee members, as well as others, would start to build a vocabulary that they could understand the science that I was going to put on paper. And so the first thing that I had to find is, what is the best term, the best word, the best group of words to describe tracking that would not be confuse any other word or set of words with any other science or any other profession. And I looked through the dictionary, because, the common language out there for tracking is tracking, or it might be to track, or the trail, or a trace, or some of these terms, a set of footprints. And the problem with using those terms scientifically is they have cross-meaning in common language, as well as how we use them in other sciences. I mean, like, for instance, I could talk about a footprint of a building. Well, if I said, hey, listen, the other day I saw a footprint, you would probably say, oh, like on the ground? Like a foot? Like, in other words, they would need it explained. Or if I said, yeah, I was on a trail the other day, like a path? You got to explain, because other people come from different language base, and so those words mean something different to them, and you always got to clarify. If I say I'm a tracker, then only people that live in rural environments. You take someone from the middle of the city, and I ask people in the middle of the city, what are you tracking? Are you tracking boxes? I mean, you work for UPS? What are you tracking? Are you tracking satellites? Are you tracking radio waves? I mean, what do you... And so I said right off the bat, okay, I've got to find a word that is tracking specific, that has no other meaning out there, so that when this starts to become popular, there can't be a cross-pollinated word out there that will have dual meanings with other sciences or then other professions. And so I went through a number of different dictionaries, and the only word that is tracking, tracker, footprint, trail specific is the word spoor. And so this particular word it refers to a track, a trail, a scent, droppings of a wild animal, a trace that you can progress looking at someone or something that you're wanting to follow. And so in noun form, if we just look at the noun form of it, it would be referring to the trail of an animal or a person that you can discern with your eye. That would be in noun form. In verb form, it would be to track by following a trail of animal or human based on what you can discern with your eyes. And so when I found that word, it comes from the best history I can find for that word was in 1823. It comes from Old English and Dutch. And so I said, that's going to have to be the base by which I deliver this science of spoorology. Now, I will differentiate. Forensics is different than spoorology. But because the Marshals Service sent me to that college, and because of my background with these tracking units for the Marshals Service, I kind of had a mandate that I had to pursue this loosely. And so I had to form this science. And since I am in law enforcement and everything refers back to the court, forensics is what I added with spoorology. Just like psychology is a word by itself, a science by itself, but when you put forensic psychology, you're talking that you're using psychology for the courts. And so forensic spoorology is I am using footprint evidence, trail, track, and I'm using that for the courts. And so that's kind of the meaning generally of forensic spoorology. And so that gave me my word, the one word that no matter where you use it, it has one meaning and one meaning only. So that is how I came upon the word spoor. And of course, ology just means, the science of, or the study of.
That is cool. That is really cool.
And so that laid the foundation for my thesis, which is very scientific heavy, because it had never been written about before this way. It's used generally by many, many people now. Tracking is. But it's a common skill that's more of a trade type skill. And I wanted to cross it over into the sciences so that other sciences could look at it and say, ooh, that is a science, because it's following the same pattern of all the sciences. And so that was the mindset when I walked into it. So with that said, do you have any questions, or do you want me just to start diving into this science?
Real quick, is there any other terminology we need to be familiar with, like the signature exchange? Let's see. I'm looking. Aerial spore, ground spore, so that's top sign and bottom sign. Is there any other terminology you'd like to share with us before we start in?
Well, there's a bunch, and what I'll do is when I come to terms that are sporology specific, I'll describe the word. If that'd probably be the easiest way.
Yes.
And that way, if I don't talk about something, I'm not, someone's not going to say, well, he never talked about that. So, but anyway, this science is, the way I developed it is a peculiar thing in that at the time that I wrote the thesis, I had to come up with a question. What question do I want to have answered? What question will drive this thesis? And the question that all trackers take for granted as they get skill is in reading the human behavior and the footprint. So someone who's very skilled at tracking will look at the footprint, the trail of footprints, in other words, the spoor, and they'll say, oh, this guy's upset. And someone will look and say, how, you can't tell someone's upset by just looking at the spoor on the ground. And so I said, okay, well, the question I want to answer is, can you read human behavior in the spoor evidence? Can you do that? Is it possible to do that? So this whole thesis is written to answer that one question. And when you're doing scientific research, you have to limit your focus like that in order to truly get to the details. If you make it too broad, you really don't answer anything. You rummage around, and travel from too many places. So that was the question. And so
wait, real quick. Let me recap. For those of you that are joining us, the Tracker Radio channel, and we are talking with Ty Cunningham, Master Tracker, and we are absolutely being overwhelmed by the information that this man is bringing us. Right now, we are talking about his thesis on forensic sporology, and he is about to just level us with reading behavior in a footprint. Okay. Thank you, Ty. Thank you so much for being here. Continue, sir.
No worries. Thanks for allowing me to. All right. So what I wanted to explore in this thesis is this: the topic of human behavioral influences on spoor evidence, and then the ability intrinsically to observe, classify, and interpret spoor evidence. And so I built two things had to happen. I had to build a paradigm by which I could look to this paradigm as the basis for the science of sporology. And then I had to build an algorithm that allowed me to be in line with the paradigm. And so I had to formulate these. And so when you take and you look at any observable thing, we have a tendency, we all want to classify it, give it meaning, interpret what it means. It's a normal process of thought. We all like doing that because it makes us comfortable. Well, it makes me very comfortable, too, to do it that way. That reasoning method helps us. And so when I'm trying to deal with a story on the ground, I have to project these walking gate encryptions that I can analyze. And it takes experience to do that at a high level. And so that's where this exploration begins. So I designed this modeling-based representation on how to decrypt human movement to facilitate recognizing, classifying, and interpreting people and their behaviors by their footfall sequences. And
holy mackerel.
So what the osis algorithm does is it really looks at the totality of the circumstances, and in common language, it's what's set out there as the sign story. In other words, what approach is being used to being designed to answer those questions? Can human behavior recognition happen in the gait footfall sequence? And all the gait footfall sequence is mechanically the body moves, and as we take one step to another, and this I'm being very crude, I'll get to the details later, but that is a gait footfall sequence. My gait moves, my feet hit the ground, and it's sequential, and I'll talk about the science of what that means. And as soon as my feet hit the ground, then I build a spoor-chain signature. It's mine alone. Every one of us has a different spoor-chain signature. If you look at all the points of the osis algorithm, not one person on the planet has the same spoor-chain signature as another. There may be similarities. There may be one or two points that are the same. But throughout the whole osis algorithm, you cannot match up all those points to many people. In other words, it's very descriptive of one, just like a fingerprint would be. And so that's what a gait footfall sequence is in relation to a spoor-chain signature.
Wow. That is awesome. So, but now, I mean, as I would consider myself an intermediate tracker, these differences, they're kind of minor, ain't they? I mean,
yeah.
How hard is it for for a guy to see that kind of stuff?
Well, it's not necessarily hard to see. What takes a lifetime of work, and you could put whatever lifetime sequence of time on it. Some people have high IQs, have great vision. They can be told something. They have a lot of passion. They believe. They imprint. They can go out there and they make themselves good at something, and they start using their mind to project behavior naturally. Well, those people, are naturals, and every science has them. Every profession has them. And then you have those who have to get in the dirt and dig.
Sure.
It doesn't.
Sure.
It doesn't come as natural, and they have to work hard. But they have the passion and the drive, and they keep going until they get it. The only difference between science, and non-science is just the method. That is all.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, you didn't interrupt. That's why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, this is good stuff.
There's so much.
Wow.
Yeah, there's so much to this. Okay, let's go back. Okay, how much locomotor and psychomotor information that can be collected from the spoor evidence is based on a lot of factors, and most of the tracking world, basics of tracking.
Real quick, we came on some terminology. Locomotor versus psychomotor. What are those?
Okay. Locomotor is just locomotion. And, of course, our body has its own, and when we say motor, we're talking about ambulatory. We move. Locomotor is the body itself moving. Psychomotor is our mind interacting with our motor skills.
I see.
Okay, so what's going on in my brain, and then what my body is doing.
Wow, that's deep. That's really deep. Okay.
Yeah, the interesting thing is we all do it. We just don't have these words. But these are scientific words that are used to explain it scientifically. We could replace them with lots of, like, hey, I'm walking. or hey, he was thinking right here, so he walked over there. Right? That's common language. Okay.
Sure.
So this paradigm that I'm going to build for the listener now, this BGS paradigm, I had to find one. And so I had to go to the modern sciences to find a close paradigm that I could mimic, some truths, natural laws that will never change, in order for me to start building this platform for the science of sporology. And so this spoor evidence data that I observe with my eyes on the ground, what I had to do in this thesis is, one, I had to observe it through direct visual observation. In other words, I had to see it myself. Then I had to build 2 lanes. One was a spoor analysis lane by which I had people move, and I watched their movement. Then I had to confirm what I pulled off the ground through direct visual observation in incident reconstruction areas, where I set up scenarios so that those same people that move through the spoor analysis lanes could do these incidences without me watching it, where I could take their data that were in the spoor analysis lane, and I could overlay their data into the incident reconstruction area to validate the collected research based on 3 factors: behavior, gait, and spoor. So BGS means behavior, gait, spoor paradigm. And so as I was looking at this paradigm, constructing it, the only place that I could find a suitable donor, if you will, in the sciences was through the great British physicist Sir Isaac Newton.
Wow.
And the laws of motion from his base are uncontested today. We take them as fact. And so the BGS paradigm is laid out with these three basic factors. Every body that moves through locomotor function continues in a state of rest of uniform rectilinear motion unless compelled to change its state by the action of forces, which is psychomotor. So let me break that down. If our mind does not have a thought, if our mind does not think, if it just doesn't move, and we're talking either from the frontal lobe, right? So consciously or subconsciously, and I'll talk about this. I'll talk about this later. But if our mind does not think, our body will not move.
Sure.
We have no reason to move.
Sure.
And so our body will stay at rest until it's acted upon by forces, and that force is what we think in our mind. Those innervations are the things that move our body. Now, that's point number one for the BGS paradigm. The second point, the change of motion. In other words, once our body starts moving, the change of motion, which I call registered deviation anomaly, something different from the normal gait footfall sequence or spoor-chain signature. So
okay, wait. Break that down for a second now.
Okay.
Break that down.
So if we're walking a normal gait, if we're normal walking, if we deviate off of that normal pattern that we construct for ourselves, that's called a registered deviation anomaly.
Registered deviation anomaly. Okay, I got it.
Okay, it's just, all it's saying is, hey, something acted upon this person and the normal gait has changed.
Yes.
Okay, so that change of motion is proportional to the force acting and takes place along the straight line which the force acts. So in other words, as I'm moving, something from my environment that I observe comes into my body as an input. And that input goes in, and I have thoughts, and it changes both my locomotor based on the psychomotor function, right? I just change. And that's what's registered. So when you were walking and you see a deviation in the walking pattern,
yes,
something happened in the environment that caused that particular person, the track maker, the spoor maker, to have to change. They had to.
Yeah.
And that's the second point of the BGS paradigm. That is a given truth. It's a given truth based on Newton's laws of motion. Now, the third point to the BGS paradigm. There is always a reaction equal and opposite to any action. So in other words, if I have actions of both locomotor and psychomotor, they're always going to be equal and opposite. So in other words, any action that I take, there is an equal and opposite reaction that has to take place because of my action. So we have the two opposites. Start moving, I will stay in motion unless something acts upon me, which is also psychomotor. It's a thought. I can change my gait footfall sequence in my environment. I'm walking normally, and all of a sudden I get an input from my environment. It changes the chemical reaction in my brain. I get a new thought, and that thought changes my locomotor function. So it shifts. It goes somewhere else. And so just real quick, and I don't want to jump ahead, but for instance, I'm walking, a brown bear steps out of the bushes. I have a reaction because I just got an input that is kind of scary. And so that what you're going to see in the spoor-chain signature is what happened in my mind when the input came in that there was a bear.
Right.
And so my body had to change my normal gait footfall sequence or my locomotor function based on psychomotor input. I had a new input that took precedence over me continuing to walk normally. And so the anomaly, the registered deviation anomaly, would be that point at which the new input came in and altered my gait footfall sequence. That is what brings, in this crude sense of, there's a lot more to it, but in this crude sense of my explaining it, that's what brings the behavior. We can't look inside someone's mind and see behavior until it's expressed through action. Once action takes place, we can read all behavior because it's out for us to see it. And so as a science, that means I could observe it. And if I could observe it through direct visual observation, then I can classify it and I can interpret it because it's out in the open. And so that's why I had to use Newton's law of motion, because when we're talking about sporology, or the science of spoor, or tracking, or following a trail, we're talking about human and animal movement. And that's what we're reading as trackers. So that kind of encapsulates in paradigm I had to build in order for there to be a truth, a universal truth that we all agree scientifically exists. And Newton's linear paradigm that he constructed through his laws of motion are uncontested. They have been tested and retested and tested over and over again, and it's just true natural law. And so by attaching my BGS paradigm to that, it gave this science its footing for me to actually produce it and build the algorithm. So
wow. That is outstanding, man. That right there is a ton of intel.
Well,
so,
I spent a year, literally a year, of doing nothing but just this research and writing. So it was pretty deep. Now that, of course, was just in school while I was at the command college. Of course, the foundation to all this was my whole life of tracking, you know.
Yes, sir. Thank God. Thank God. I mean, I say it, and I'm sure everybody, all the listeners, say thank you so much for your hard work. I mean, this is great stuff. You were talking about register deviation anomalies.
Yeah.
So obviously we can most of us that are listening can say we're following a set of tracks, and all of a sudden something changes, and we're looking at it and we're trying to figure out what happened, and we're drawing from the environment, trying to pull in all the hints, clues, and details. Give me no pressure, but give me an example or a process or procedure that you would use to do that.
Well, of course, my process is I look at it and go, oh, this is what happened here.
But for the rest of us.
But there are times that I get skunked. I mean, we're all human. Like, what in the heck happened here, you know? And that's why it's real important to be a student always. And whether you teach and you're a student, or whether you're a student and you're a student, of course, when you teach, you actually have to explain yourself, which then makes you study more. And so being a teacher is actually very helpful to being a student of this particular science. When I look at the ground, what I use is this osis algorithm, because it draws in all the points that I need to look at. And now we're talking real crudely, because this is mechanical, right? We have 4 different methods of tracking, really. You have simple tracking, right? We all start there. We don't see the difficult stuff, but we see all the easy things to look at, like in snow or in sand, and wow, somebody walked here, they stepped here, they stepped here. This simple tracking. Then you have mechanical type tracking, where now you're using some method to keep the trail going, even when you can't see some of the spoor, but you can see others. Or based on the terrain, certain gait footfall sequences, some parts you can see really well, some parts you can't, because you're stepping on twigs, you're stepping, on rocks, you're stepping in sand this time, the terrain changes, and that's what confuses our eyes. It's not that the foot did not continue the way it did. If you don't see an anomaly, then the trail is continuing to move the way it was moving behind you that you were following. And so those anomalies that you're talking about, you have to stop, and this is why you have to spend a lot of time with whatever quarry you're following. So in other words, you can't just be a tracker who just follows trails without doing some direct visual observation. You have to be out with the quarry that you could possibly have to face someday, and you have to watch behavior manifested in action. And then you have to go put your eyes on the spoor chain signature so that you can see what that behavior looks like on the ground once it's manifest through locomotor function. And so you'll see me go out and just sit on the ground for hours and hours and hours. I might pick up a trail of a deer, see the normal gait, look at anomalies. Now, I've trailed all the different types of deer on this continent, so it's easy for me, to switch my mind based on what quarry of deer I'm after, and then knowing their behaviors. This is why you have to use things like training manuals, you have to go to classes, you have to do independent study, you have to spend a lot of time in the field. Because the more you build this platform of knowledge based on behavior that you've observed, it's tough to classify and interpret something that you have not observed before. And so those trackers who don't spend countless hours out in the environments just watching natural movement through direct visual observation and seeing what that looks like in the spoor-chain signature, if you don't spend that time, there is no way then guessing. Right?
So what we're talking about here is for lack of a better word, an intimate relationship with each and every quarry.
Absolutely. Now I can take a human and tell you, hey, this is a human. And most people can look at a deer track and say, oh, this is probably, a deer, or this is a moose. It's all from that deer family. I'm pretty good, hooved animal. I know that there are elk in this area, so it's probably an elk because it's bigger. This is a deer. Hey, this is a cat. This is a bear, and so forth. The problem is, if I have not watched bears through direct visual observation countless times, and then put my eyes on the spoor-chain signature based on their locomotor functioning, it's going to be difficult for me to classify and interpret. And so that's why I had to build the osis algorithm that would give me the observation methodology, the classification methodology, and the interpretation methodology that, if nothing else, I could go back to the mechanical zero, basically, to then start formulating the possibilities. And I'm not afraid, and most senior and master trackers aren't afraid to go, I don't know what the heck happened here. Because when you say, I don't know what the heck happened here, that drives you to find out. A tracker can't live with that. It's not good enough.
No, I understand.
But those trackers who don't do that, don't say, hey, I don't know, there's no drive, there's no push to then go find deep answers to what you don't know. And so I'm constantly saying to myself that I've got to go out and I've got to master this stuff. Not for anyone else. This is just for me. I don't care whether someone observes me or not. And we're social animals. All humans are. Some of us, have type A personalities and some don't. Some are extroverts, introverts, but we still are social animals. And so because of that, we always like other people to see us in our best light. It's just part of how we are as humans. But a tracker is in his own isolated world, or her world. And so that even more so, it's just like anytime I do scientific research, I'm in my own little world, and I'm looking for every possible piece of data that will explain what's going on inside my mind. And I'm not afraid. Because really the scientific method, you have to be skeptical. You have to be objective. And you have to...
That's actually a great point, real quick. That is a great point. And it makes me think about that. You look at the track, you look at the sign, and you're being skeptical with what's going on, but also your own internal interpretation because that's the tracker problem, is thinking you know what's going on already instead of thinking about it. That's awesome. I like that.
Well, and that's the scientific method. And in this corporeal world, in other words, this physical world, really science is the only way for us to verify our data. We can all have gut instincts, and we can act on those instincts for ourselves. But in a forensic world, in a court of law world, we have to bring evidence, and it has to be explainable. You have to be able to give meaning to the evidence. And the only way to do that, and that's why the courts rely on science, but it relies on other professional knowledge as well, based on experience. And as long as you can explain it so that it can be understood, courts will accept that. Now, other sciences may not. Other sciences may say, what methodology did you use to glean that data, because that's the way the sciences are. In science, we want to know the method so that we can all test it. You see, that's the differences in the sciences. If anybody could take my theories, put forth in my thesis, and replicate the test results, or not the test results, the test methods, and see if it reproduces the same conclusions based on the data. That's what science is, so that other people can take it and go, hey, I want to do these same experiments and see if they, and that's how you see so many of the sciences having split off. I mean, how do we progress? How do we progress in this physical world without testing our theories? Testing the theories and moving our knowledge base forward. And that's why I had to build this science, because to me, everything I do is based on this science and my experience. Someone else may be very fine. Someone else may be very fine being a tracker and just going out and doing it casually and enjoying themselves, and that's fine. They're still trackers, and their methods are still valid. But I should be able to take you with me out there, and you should be able to replicate my data and then see if my data stands up to my methods and based on my conclusions. And why do we have so many different sciences? Why do we have so many different theories? Why do theories change? Because people take these and they push the envelope of knowledge. They push research so that we can move ourselves forward. And I like that method. So you and I, standing next to each other on a trail, reasoning minds can differ, not only on the data that we're collecting, but on the methodology that we're going to observe it, classify it, and interpret it, as well as our conclusions. You and I can differ looking at the same data.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, it's not so much whether or not you are right or wrong. It's, hey, the method you are using is used in all the sciences. It's a sound method to evaluate that data to get to the point in your research that you're needing to go. Are you going to use descriptive statistics or inferential statistics? Are you using descriptive research, correlation research, or experimental research? You see, these methods are tried, true, proven through all the sciences, and I had, because no one had done it yet in the world, I had to put tracking on that map. Now, my research is at the very base level. Hopefully through my research, many, many more scientists who are trackers will take and start branching out with the scientific methodology and going out there. And a lot of them have. A lot of them from other sciences have used tracking as part of their research, and they improve their methodology using tracking, and that's all good. All I did was I created a science that was tracking.
That is outstanding, Ty. Hey, everybody, this is the Art of Tracking radio show. We have Ty Cunningham on tonight. He is really laying it down for us tonight. I'm loving this. Ty was raised in Alaska. He was in the military tracker, and he was a U.S. Marshal, and he's really laying it down. His thesis on forensic sporology, we're going to make it available. We're going to try to find a couple links, and this is good stuff. Just a quick deal there. Ty has been talking about some of the terminology and some of his scientific methodology. So let's keep listening in here. Thank you so much again for being here, Ty.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for having me. Yep, thank you very much. Well, let's continue to go a little further. Let's talk a little bit about gait and behavioral analysis.
Oh boy.
I think everybody who's listening are trackers in their own right, or interested, and so they've been around it a little bit. So they understand what's on the ground and how to look at what's on the ground. But when we talk about human movement, so the body walking and then the behavior, I think that's not as well thought out in trackers as much. We look a lot at what you called earlier the bottom spoor, or what I call ground spoor, and that's what they look at because that's what they see most of the time. And I spent a lot of years just looking at humans and animals moving before I looked at what was on the ground, because I wanted to know why it was on the ground that way. And so that's where we really need to go. The normal human movement that is comfortable, it's our normal referenced way of moving, is a normal walking gait. We can sustain that for a long period of time. Every animal has its own method of finding a relaxed state to move in. As humans, it's walking. And so that forward propulsion that we have is based on a few things. It's based on a person's height, their weight, their limb length, their foot length, what footwear they have on, and other personal characteristics of motion, how they move their arms in relation to how their legs move, how they hold their hat, which is the upper torso. So it's the head, arms, and torso. How does that sit on top of the lower platform as we move? And so
I've never heard it broke down so far, Ty. I've never heard it broke down so far. So that right there is outstanding, man. Thanks. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, so when you look at a gait, or what is locomotor motion, that movement, you have to take into consideration the whole body, because we just don't move our lower half and our upper half does nothing. And if you watch people, you will see how they carry their body. If you watch animals, animals. Each animal has their own unique way of motion. They have, the human race has its unique way, and then you could break it down subculturally. If you are in the military teaches you a new way to move, and so that becomes your new neurosynaptic memory, and you start to pick up those characteristics of motion because they become habitual. And, people in Europe walk a tad bit different than we do here, and people from the country walk different than people in the city, and so forth. And so not only do you have to watch people and animals, so many of them, that you begin to understand the nuances of the spore chain signature when they change even slightly based on the gait and, of course, the behavior. We're talking about what happens in action based on Newton's theory or the BGS paradigm.
So wait, real quick. A good exercise might be to try to learn the difference between a city person's walk and a country person's walk.
Well, yeah, you'll see a big difference, especially if you take the city person and have them walk in the country, and you'll see the same gait problems with the country person being put in a dang city. They will change. They will change their gait and behavior. In other words, how their body moves because of experience. Absolutely.
That's awesome. All right, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no. We're having a conversation. This is good stuff. Absolutely.
This is great stuff.
You go over to Southeast Asia and watch them move. And they're going to move different than someone from South America moves. Yet we all, as a human race, move in a predictable way. Our head sits on top of our shoulders. Our torso sits underneath of our neck. But there's so many issues to motion based on how we've been raised, our injuries, how we carry our body, how we move our arms, how we look in our environment, how we interpret the input from our environment, which makes us have anomalies off of normal motion. So when you look at this scientifically, literally, you could study this your whole life and never come to an end. So this idea that you could be a master tracker can't be that you've mastered everything. It has to be that you've mastered the process by which you continue to learn. Right?
Now that's awesome right there. So you're saying find a process, the correct process, and use it, and that's how you'll grow.
Absolutely. I would ask you, as a matter of fact, if I was with you tracking and I see you making conclusions based on what you're looking at, as a master tracker, put quotes around that, even though I've been tested to be that in law enforcement, in the Marshals Service, that's another story, but still, what I would do is I would say, okay, what are you looking for? Right? I would need to start classifying how you're doing it so I could then see the method you're using. Or else I may not even understand how you're coming to your conclusions. Not that they're wrong, just that I don't understand because I use a different method perhaps. And that's why the scientific method, I think, is more accurate because all the sciences use them. See, so all the sciences use that base scientific method, and so that method has been well researched and usable to study everything. And that's why I had to link tracking to that, because what I saw in tracking, growing up, talking to people, was there are so many different methods to observe something that I don't want to have to ask. I would rather say, hey, I'm using the scientific method. Oh, hey, I understand that. Right? I understand that. And so now I'm on board. I got it. And so by me attaching this now as my science that I use, it makes it easier for me to communicate to other people of other sciences. And so your method and my method in tracking may be different because of how we learn. Now, each school of thought teaches a different method to observe, but you'll notice I've been to a lot of different schools, of course not all of them, but the one thing they can't teach, the one thing they cannot teach is interpretation, because that's experience. I cannot tell you, because that would be me. I'm the one that has the experience. I can say, hey, listen, when you see a footprint do this, these are the possibilities that could have produced that. But that's my experience. Until you have created the experience yourself, interpretation is a difficult thing. And so that's why I had to root this particular science to the scientific method, so that I didn't have to talk about the methodology of how I'm observing this stuff. And like I said, though, this science is so brand new that it might be 100, 150 years. You know, Sir Isaac Newton lived a while ago, and his laws of motion are still in effect today, because it's natural truth. Well, I've attached that natural truth to this paradigm. I've built the algorithm based on this paradigm. It might be 50 to 100 years before this catches on, if at all.
Sure,
you know,
sure.
I don't know. But to understand it, you have to understand human movement, animal movement, those action behaviors that manifest from the thoughts that come from a brain, and then how the gate moves over the surface of the earth, and then how it registers, and then what that behavior looks like in the registration.
Sure. Sure.
Yep.
Tell me about pitch angle analysis.
Okay. Now this is particular to the osis algorithm. When maybe I should describe that, and then we can get into that. I've talked about the BGS paradigm. Let me talk about the osis algorithm, which will allow me then to branch into that. That sound good? Hello?
Hello?
You still there?
Yes, sir. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Did we almost lose a connection?
Well, yeah, we must have.
Oh boy.
There must have
Sorry
been,
about
there
that.
Must have been one. No, there must have been one of them black holes that moved over us or something.
I'm actually in Cave Junction, Oregon, and there's a lot of fires and smoke around, so it might be messing with my signal.
Oh, that could be. No worries. What I said was you wanted to jump into pitch angle and so forth.
I didn't mean to jump the gun. I'm sorry about that.
No. You're fine. Let me talk, because I talked about the BGS paradigm. Let me talk about the osis algorithm a little bit, and then we can get into some specifics about
Yes,
that.
Sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
if that's okay.
Oh, by all means, Ty, you are the man.
Well, I don't know if that. I
we do.
know
it's
that.
Cool.
The osis algorithm is this. It means, the acronym osis means observation, classification, interpretation of spoor evidence. Okay? On the BGS paradigm. So what I needed then was a model. The model that I could build so that anyone could take the model and replicate it based on the paradigm. And so that's what it is. And so for that purpose, I had to do that in order to glean human behavior at the end and whether or not it could be observable. And so the osis algorithm is a uniform scale format methodology. Assess the extent to which spoor evidence will actually glean human behavior. And so that's why it was built. In other words, what we were talking about earlier, this, as dealing with the science of sporology, this is the methodology, the physical structure, the bones, the muscles, to what the BGS paradigm is in spirit. So this is the body that wraps around the BGS paradigm.
There's too much to even handle. You keep going, boss. I'm loving this.
I'm sorry. Okay, so the osis algorithm has three main sections that are broken down by function. The first function relates to spoor platting. So this is looking at the last known spoor, the tracker's triangle, ground contact points, and aerial travel points based on the gait footfall sequence, and then how it registers in the spoor-chain signature. That's the first function. The next function relates to gait platting. So what is the gait analysis, the gait enablers, and the gait deviations? And the final function relates to behavior platting. In other words, behavioral analysis. And so these are the three functions of the osis algorithm. And so within the osis functions, there are 12 functioning subparts that define spoor characteristics, which will isolate the unique data to individual specificity. And all I'm saying is, if you apply this osis algorithm to a trail, that spoor-chain signature will produce one person that left it when you put it up against hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of other spoor-chain signatures. So what you're trying to glean by the osis algorithm is reliable accuracy as to human behavior identification that's registered in the spoor-chain signature. Because if you can't rely on the accuracy of your method, then you're always going to believe you're missing something, that you don't have it, that I'm not sure. And a tracker can't work on I'm not sure. He has to say, I don't know, which is definitive. I'm not sure means he may know something or he may not. It's better to say, I don't know, and then start using the methodology to sort out whatever the projections could be. But with that, the algorithm then allows that skeleton to build methodology. Now, let's kind of look at this. So we're talking about a classification of spoor. We're talking about foot measurement analysis. We're talking about quadrant reference analysis. We're talking about foot mapping analysis. We're talking about microclass characteristics, micro-identifying characteristics, spoor dynamics, foot roll analysis, apex of foot arc, stride and step analysis, pitch angle analysis, trail width analysis, macro class characteristics, macro identifying characteristics, track maker class characteristics, and innate manifest adaptive traits. This is very detailed, this precise.
Obviously, we probably don't have time to go into all of those. Hopefully I can get a link, or we can talk about getting your thesis to everybody. But those last few things that you were talking about kind of require definition. One last time,
sure.
We're ARTA Tracking Radio Channel. We're talking with Ty Cunningham, master tracker, born and raised in Alaska. Was in the Army. Was a tracker in the Army and Special Forces, I think he said, and then was a U.S. Marshal. Okay. And it's also a martial artist, bar none. And I want to make sure we get to your website. What was your website, real quick, Ty?
It's tycunningham.org.
tycunningham.org. Please go to his website and check it out. He's got a lot of information, classes, training, a lot of stuff there. And we were talking about all this different deep subject of forensic sporology. This is great stuff, and we're so glad Ty had the time to talk with us tonight.
So, definitions. The things I just spoke of, yeah, like you said, we don't have enough time, but all of these are the meat by which the methodology finds its place in the osis algorithm. And so when we classify, well, spoor has to be observable. I mean, you don't even know what to follow or what to classify or what to interpret if you can't see it. And so that's the start point. You have to be able to observe it. And so in the thesis, I do describe some methods to finding it. And all the schools teach it, how to find the place of last contact or the place last seen, and then trying to find the footprints. That has methodology as well. And for the sake of the thesis, I give an example of how to do that. The algorithm itself begins with the observation of some spoor on the ground, and then leads from that to the behavior that left it, so that you can get an accurate interpretation of what person was doing. And all behavior is the body moving for some reason. And so the osis algorithm gives you a methodology, the science methodology of getting that done based on the paradigm. And so I was speaking of classification of spoor and foot measurement analysis. And these are just terms that describe what a lot of trackers already do. When I classify spoor, I have 5 classifications, from a clear print to just a piece of sign. And so a clear print would have all the information in that would tell me that something's human, that would tell me that something's a deer, that would tell me that something's a bear. And so it has all that information to classify my quarry. And then it goes from a perfect print, so a class 1 type print, all the way to a class 5 type print, which is a piece of sign that is going to need other information to make it useful. You would not be able to tell in a piece of sign whether it was human or not, unless, of course, it was litter of some kind. But so that's the classification of spoor. The foot measurement analysis, everyone does it. We have points on the spoor chain signature, each footprint that registers in the ground, and we measure from the heel to the toe. We measure across the ball of the foot, across the heel, and different points based on what characteristics are actually showing in the micro class characteristics, or whether they're identifying on a macro or micro level. In most tracking, people do that. And then the quadrant reference analysis is pretty simple. The foot is broken down into 10 pieces, and so on a trail, if I have a perfect class 1 print up front, I can draw the whole print. And basically what I do with another blank footprint as I'm moving down the trail is any time I see one of those 10 quadrants manifest with perfect information, I draw it on the blank footprint, so that theoretically down the trail I can reconstruct the quadrant reference analysis of different footprints down the trail and redraw the track that I drew from a class 1 print and match them up to show that it's the same quarry. And so that's just a method part of this osis algorithm. Now the foot mapping analysis is a little more detailed, because what I'm doing in foot mapping analysis is I'm actually trying to find specific details in the spoor print on the ground that would give me both micro and macro class characteristics and identifying characteristics that isolate that one footprint from all other footprints based on the characteristics of the footwear. And that's a science in and of itself.
Yes,
that is part of tracking, but is isolated in the forensic world. And then,
so on the macro and micro things, I mean, for lack of better terminology, are you talking about like Tom Brown's press releases or what?
Well, no, not necessarily the pressure releases that he would use, as much as a physical trait that transfers from the foot to the ground every time. So it either could be.
But you're saying a repetitive signature motion tweak of the footprint.
Yes. So it could either be a manufacturing type thing on the footwear, or it could be a wear a wear pattern that is unique to that particular foot, or it could be the way that it's created based on how the body moves in the gait footfall sequence. So the algorithm is that detailed, so that by the time you get to the end of the algorithm, where you're in the interpretation of this, you have so many points of identification in the algorithm that it isolates, just like a fingerprint. It isolates not only the behavior, but the classification to one particular set of prints over all others. And so I have done some sub-research to, at least on a cursory level, validate my theory, in that I have taken individuals and I have had them walk. I've overlaid the algorithm over their spoor-chain signature, not only to look at the details of classification and interpretation based on a number of sets of prints. And there are so many points that the algorithm has that literally, just like a fingerprint, if I find 14 or 15 points on a fingerprint that from a known print that I've off of a person that I've fingerprinted to the unknown print that I've collected from a crime scene, and I find 14 points that match that up, that is better evidence than if I only find one characteristic on that fingerprint.
Wow.
And so the osis algorithm, if you use the algorithm as a methodology, brings so many points to the spoor-chain signature that you literally could line, 100,000 spoor-chain signatures up, and not one of them will be the same.
Wow. I need to see a map of that. I need to see a physical diagram of that, because this is serious information, and I'm going to be looking for it for the rest of my life.
Well, I can't say that I haven't spent my whole life doing this, and I'll probably spend the rest of my life doing it. But
sure,
you've got that bug like the rest of the tracking world. But if you go, I don't know what page it's on, I put a diagram on there. I can't remember what page of my thesis it is. And, of course, I describe the algorithm and the details of that and lay that out. But it is very detailed. It is very detailed. And one of the last things, because I know we're running out of time, that I wanted to get into is really for those listeners is to take a look at behavior, because I think trackers don't spend enough time on behavior. And I'm saying that generally. There are those that spend a lot of time, and there are those that don't. But the majority spend so much time just trying to find footprints and follow them that they don't become students of just human or animal behavior. And in order to really understand spoorology, you have to master not only behavior, but gait and then spoor. All three together build the paradigm that make the algorithm work.
Well,
so
that is, you really set an anchor there and a goal for all of us. I mean, the idea of behavior, to me, is one of the epitomes of a master tracker. I mean, to be able to tell what's going on in the mind and in the body by footprints is an outstanding gift of knowledge and experience. It's great. I love that.
Well, if we could, the last little bit, I would like to describe for the listeners and talk about this behavior, which I call psychomotor behavioral programming.
All right.
Now,
yes,
in
sir.
the beginning, I talked about the BGS paradigm being behavior, gait, and spoor. But those three together make up what we all have within us, which is the thought or the innervation that moves the body. And so all outward movement is a stamp of an inward thought or emotion. And so it registers within the spoor-chain signature. All of the emotions, the thoughts, as ground contact point indicator pressure releases or fluctuating pressure releases. And now I'm going to quote a few people that I referenced because I have a few clips here, and they are actually in my thesis as well. The well-known psychologist William James, he observed this. He said, objects of rage, love, and fear not only prompt a man to outward deeds, but provoke characteristic alterations in his attitude and visage, and affect his breathing, his circulation, and other organic functions in specific ways. As with instincts, so with emotions, the mere memory or imagination of an object may suffice to liberate the excitement. One may get angrier in thinking over one's insult than at the moment of receiving it, and we melt more over a mother who is dead than we ever did when she was living. We literally are walking behaviors. Our outward motions are behaviors, and they are elicited from our thoughts and emotions. And no human being on the planet can move without dangling their behavior in their gait and in their spoor-chain signature. Another a famous chiropractor, his name was Dr. Dispenza, and I can't remember his first name offhand. He said that your every thought produces a biochemical reaction in the brain. The brain then releases that chemical signal that's transmitted to the body, where they act as messengers of the thought.
Wow.
So when we think with our mind, and there's not a human being that doesn't think with their mind, either consciously or subconsciously, he calls it a neurosynaptic memory. And let me give you an example. All of us now work on computers, and we have countless passwords for this or for that. In government, you can't use the same password. You have to change it all the time. Every 60 or 90 days, you got to change your password. Well, the first time you have to be in a hurry to get in your computer, you use your old password because it is a neurosynaptic memory created over experience of actually acting out the behavior over and over and over. So that new password you have to change that you made, it takes you 6 or 7, 8 times of doing that consciously with your forebrain before it becomes a neural memory where you can do it without thought. It becomes a subconscious thought. So, for instance, if I'm sitting on the couch and I have a thought or a taste, an emotion in my mouth that says I'm thirsty, I'm halfway to the fridge just based on that thought to get my drink or to get some water or to whatever. So our thoughts produce our behaviors. And so we can understand someone's thinking, their thoughts, by seeing their behaviors. And so that's why it's crucial that we spend a lot of time watching various behaviors. Now, I don't like to make fun of people who are depressed. I don't like to make fun of people who are angry, but I like to watch them because they give me their true behaviors, and I get to go back and look at those behaviors, not only through direct visual observation of watching them, then how it registers in the ground. So that when I see a gait that shortens up, that starts to actually roam a little bit, I start seeing anomalies in the gait pattern, I can actually build an emotional and thought profile that tells me the probable behavior. Now, with that said, I use these two models to describe this so that we can all understand. And so I want to talk about grief, weariness, fatigue, labored cognition. In other words, our mind, the mind that is on those things. And then I'm going to talk about the way the body moves when we have that. And it rings true because I'm human too. And so when I'm grieved, my body moves a certain way. When I'm very tired, it moves a certain way. Now, I've built this profile only as a general profile, but we could break this down and get very specific based on each one of these. Let me just read this profile. The movements are made slowly, heavily, without strength, unwillingly, and without exertion, and are limited to the fewest possible. Outwardly, then, the quarry walks slowly, unsteadily, dragging the feet and hanging the arms. The knees are unsteady in support of locomotion, and with this condition of weakness of the voluntary thoughts of the neocortex comes the degradation of energy to move the muscle apparatus of the whole body. This condition brings with it a motor weakness, which drags the feet along the ground with atypical shortened gait. Accompanying the weakness are frequent stops with no apparent reasoning except to suggest a mindset which is sluggish innervations that the psychomotor apparatus produces through the midbrain, acting on established neural patterns that the frontal lobe cannot override. Voluntary movement is unwanted, and the quarry only moves to fight the cause of the weariness. Rather than expend energy to walk, the quarry would rather sit in a sunken state, looking inward instead of outward at the world around, and reflexes are slow with responding to external stimuli through the senses. Does that not describe someone who has that mental thought? That's how our body...
That sounds perfect. I mean, it sounds like somebody that's even, like, tired and needs to rest, you know. I mean, that's awesome.
And so when you see that behavior in footprints, you can start building that thought profile that leads to behavior. Because not only are you human and you can feel it, but if you, through direct visual observation, watch people who are mentally weary, who are grieving after a loss of a loved one or whatnot, you watch their bodies.
Sure.
And then you watch their gait and their spoor. And now let's talk about a different one. Let's talk about one that's a little more, let's talk about panic, fear, out of control, without cognition. This one builds a whole different behavioral profile, thought profile. The frightened quarry. The frightened quarry at first stands motionless, holding breath to avoid the object of fear. Perhaps the quarry will crouch down, cowering away from the object, hoping that the object of fear does not recognize the quarry's presence. A cold sweat may appear due to clammy, pale skin. The feet revolt and follow the fear with short, sharp cuts, which move away from the object of fear. As the fear escalates to terror, the resultant explosion of violent emotions sparks many possible overt behaviors. All the muscular apparatus may become rigid on the one hand or explode into convulsive scurry of movement, which scampers the feet erratically away from the object of fear. The baseline is suddenly aborted in confusion as the body tries to recover from the object. Shortened steps and stride, wider trail width, and the ground contact points are labored by foot drags to maintain stability. Eventually, escape is manifest as the spoor-chain signature begins to open up through locomotor behavioral programming, trying to reestablish a baseline which is conducive to speed. Gradually, from the confusion of clustered movement comes an increased distance within step and stride. The trail begins to narrow, and the ground contact points recover from the extreme angles and damage to the wall, floor, and horizon of the track.
That is wild.
So that's two different examples of a thought profile, this psychomotor behavioral programming, that I built these two as examples in my thesis that show how these thoughts, these emotions are manifest in the gait, footfall sequence, and then subsequently how they register in a spoor-chain signature. So when you go out and you're looking at a trail of somebody walking in a normal walking gait, and all of a sudden you see what I just read as far as fear, panic, and you see that motion, you will see what happened in the behavior and be able to read it. That's the detail, though. That's the detail it takes to actually sit and observe. It's a patience game. You literally have to be like a tiger, just sitting waiting as a predator for the prey to manifest itself. You can't be the type of person who can't sit for hours and observe. You have to take the time. And we haven't even discussed becoming a geologist. You have to understand so much of terrain analysis, how people move through an environment, taking natural lines of drift, paths of least resistance, because all animals and humans do it, in relation to how the foot registers in different types of substrate. You literally could spend a lifetime and still be a beginner, and yet we've had to classify. Go ahead.
What I would like to do is have a Ty Cunningham Forensic Sporology Part 2 tracking show, because we are literally down to 3 minutes.
Okay, bud.
This has been great. I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'll try to find a link to where they can find your thesis. I hope you go ahead and make it a book, because it is so so loaded with stuff that we can't find anywhere else, you know. I mean, it's just outstanding stuff, outstanding information. TyCunningham.org, people. I would definitely visit that website. If you can make it out and take some of his courses, that would be great. Ty is a very, very busy man, and we really appreciate you being on tonight, Ty.
Well, thanks, buddy. When everyone goes to the website, that website is set up as an informational website.
Yes, sir.
I do a lot more giving away of this information than I do actually teaching the basics of tracking. However, the actual forensic sporology side I still use in law enforcement because I work out in Bush, Alaska as a village public safety officer helping the Alaska State Troopers out. So I still use this. It's still active out there in the law enforcement world.
You're heading back out towards Alaska pretty soon, too,
yeah.
Right?
Yep, going back out there to do some work through the winter. So, but listen, if everyone can just go, I'm putting as much information. The website is still building. Pretty soon I'll have all the forensic sporology stuff on there, too. Right now, it's just a lot of scoutcraft stuff, so tracking, survival, defense, dealing with my knowledge on human combative behavior, and, of course, scout tracking, which I've used in my profession. So, yeah.
Hey, guys, TyCunningham.org is a website you really need to look at. And, Ty, once again, thank you so much for coming up.
You got it, buddy. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yes, sir, and we will have you on again soon because we hadn't even touched the surface of this yet.
Well, no worries. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on your show. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You have a good evening.
All right, we'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.